everyone does what they're supposed to do, that certain mistakes or certain detrimental cultural phenomena are removed from the culture. But I don't know, this is someone that everybody could sit down and learn with. Eliyahu Navi must have been a frightening man. I mean, not because he was looking to scare people. This isn't Ozzy Osbourne. This is, maybe he was revolutionary. You're talking about Eliyahu Navi is described as a man of hair. He had long hair.
Because he was an Asian? Apparently.
Because he was white?
A Nazir.
I
like to use the word monk, but he didn't cut his hair, he didn't drink wine.
Right.
And when Ahab sent people to arrest him, so he killed them with bolts of lightning. He's sitting there on a mountain, and Ahab sends one guy. So Eliyahu just kills him. And he sends another guy. He's like, no, the first one, it was an accident. Lightning happens everywhere, Kills this guy too. He sends a third guy, and then he kills him, and then he stops sending them. Like it took 3 people to. This is not a good idea. We've had better ones. Like someone in the government should be fired. So I don't know that this is someone who's like way beyond. Meaning even a Rabbanim would be afraid to talk to someone like this. The way that Rabbi described a Rav is someone who has a relationship with people, and someone who's able to influence them, positively, and someone who's able to understand them. And a lot of the work is academic and intellectual, and as much of it, maybe even more of it, is social, psychological, in the counseling sense. So historically, we always had a hierarchy. I mean, we don't have prophets anymore, but if we needed them, or if we couldn't live without them, I'm sure we would have them. I think the prophets, pretty much the Nevi'im, said what needed to be said and did what needed to be done, and now we just have to figure it out and work on it. What I'm saying is that I don't know that we need necessarily to be learning from the greatest rabbis of all time, or from the greatest minds of all time. I don't know that we could learn from them, productively.
I understand the point that you made, but I mean, even like a community rabbi who's like, has broad shoulders, knows how to guide people, has like a healthy-ish kafa. One rabbi is Rabbi David Bar Chaim. He's a Talmid Chacham, and
he's a learning man for sure.
He has some pretty, wild, according to like the Chumrah of the week, and the Haredi Shkafa, he has some pretty wild teachings. I find it interesting that a lot of them are in accordance with Sephardi tradition. But
the Vilna Gaon was very much the same way.
So he wanted to make the claim that, practically speaking, Aruch HaShulchan would have been a much wiser choice for the Ashkenazim to hang on to, as opposed to the Mishnah Berurah. The Aruch HaShulchan, he was an accepted rabbi. He was also a community rabbi. His work also spans all of the Turim, all of the sections of Shulchan Aruch. He had practical guidance that made him much more down to earth than the claim he was making than the Mishnah Berurah, than the Chafetz Chaim.
Mishnah Berurah gives you a lot of range. He brings an opinion like this, an opinion like that.
Right.
One opinion that resolves it like this, one that resolves it like that. It's a very heavy sefer. It's not. The claim is legitimately made that it was never meant for learning halakha l'maaseh from it. That it was more for learning. And the Aruch HaShulchan didn't ask for a bracha from anyone before he published the sefer. Like it was known that he was just the one that people went to with halachic questions. That's just a function of how people learn. The Chazon Ish was one who famously said, "Yes, that's technically true, but the custom is to follow the Mishnah Berurah, so we do." Customs people did because it was the book that was there. It was popular. It was famous. He was held from. No one questions his learning ability. Today, what you have in the yeshivot is a lot of mediocre learning. Look, let me give you an example of this because I feel very strongly about the concept.
I know that.
Do you think? Thank you. You just saved me a detour into politics. Do you think that the artists of today, or the musicians of today, compare in any way to the artists or the musicians of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, Baroque era? I mean...
Well, I like David Bowie, but nobody's gonna hear about him in 500 years.
And I'm sure if David Bowie met Johann Sebastian Bach, he would say, "Man, that's awesome. Do that again."
No, but we're not going to hear about these people
Bach
in
would have like torn up all of his.
maybe 50 years is the maximum if we hear about the artists that are now.
You think people will be talking about David Bowie 50 years from now?
I think it's a miracle if they do.
Right. I mean, I'm surprised people still talk about it. He's already dead. I mean,
I know you don't like it.
no.
So what's the
No,
answer?
but the point is that back then, if someone had a little bit of musical talent, they had to go find a patron, to find someone who would pay for you to go to school and to study. And if you had a little bit of artistic talent, you probably went to a Jesuit school or you went to somewhere where they would actually teach you methodically. And it was very difficult to support lots of people this way. So the competition was ferocious. People really fought very hard in order to be accepted to a good school of art, to a good school of music, to a good school of science or mathematics. And that's how you produce geniuses, because there was real competition. Leumat zot, if you want the other side of the spectrum, communist Europe, where
I knew you were going to get there.
it was sooner or later it was inevitable. It was inevitable. I made a promise, and to do a hadarat nedarim. In communist Europe, everyone goes to college for free, but really not for free because everyone pays lots of taxes for it. Unless you're poor, then the government gives you money to have kids. So if you're wealthy, you can afford to have kids. If you're poor, you get paid too. So what you're doing is, we'll talk about the generational effect later, but in Europe, everyone goes to college. How many geniuses are we actually producing? I mean, it's nice to a certain degree that people have a higher education, but you also realize this is why they're unemployed.
Yeah, but we don't need half the population to do psychology education.
Correct.
Like,
When I was in Switzerland, there was a big farmers' revolution, a rebellion. They were saying, how come I make cheese for a living, man? You know? Why do I have to pay taxes to send some city kid to college so he can go get a second degree, and he can go get a PhD, then he can be unemployed and the government pays him anyway? He's saying, but I've been farming since I was 12. Like, why is that justice? You want to go to college, pay for yourself. Don't punish the entire society because everybody wants to go to college and come out overqualified for work, and anyway they get unemployment from the government. So when it comes to Rabbanut, I don't think the real answer would be we should send less kids to yeshiva. I wouldn't go so far as to say there's too many kids in yeshiva. I just don't think we're going to produce geniuses this way. I don't see how it's possible. There will be kids who ultimately go and ultimately succeed, and the people who need to, the people whom the generation needs will figure it out. I don't regret that a lot of people are learning. What I do regret is that it changes the way people look at learning. In that you have a lot of people that aren't necessarily competent or don't have the right perspective or don't have the right philosophy to it. It becomes a way of life. Then it becomes, because naturally when that becomes a movement, society changes. So now naturally the guy who learns Torah is basically a god. And a woman should be fortunate enough to find a guy that she can find a job to support while he's learning. So she has to take care of the kids and do the laundry and take care of the house, and she has to work and make a parnasah. And the Satmar Rebbe was one example of a Rav who didn't tolerate that. It's not Eretz Yisrael, but he said some very logical things on other topics. When it came to this, he said there's no way any of my Talmidim are sending their wives to work. If a woman has to work to support the family, it's one thing. If the guy wants to learn Torah and thinks that because of this he becomes a Mashiach and his wife has to go work in order to support him, that's crazy. I don't subscribe to that. He said, I'd rather you have, and a guy who doesn't even learn that well, he'd say, I'd rather him be honest, get a job, and make a decent living than sit in Kollel and steal from somebody who's paying him to be there. He was very down to earth in those terms. So I'm not saying I regret that there are lots of, I'm not comparing Torah to music. Today that everybody picks up a guitar and everybody learns how to play something, it doesn't produce really good quality music. But the reality is that, the society's a little bit more musically literate than it used to be, and people have access to things they didn't have access to before. Maybe it helps you find those kids that are really talented. Israel's got talent, England has talent, whatever. But I just I don't think we're ever going to produce people as revolutionary as we have in the past, because it's dilute. The market's diluted. People's taste, because so many people have access to it. We're producing music for the lowest common denominator, which is basically what we call hip-hop and like house music.
The one guy that is revolutionary, he's going to have more chances, though, to be identified as revolutionary.
Or he gets drowned out and he doesn't get attention because everybody's looking for hip-hop and rap and house music.
Yeah, you have a point as well.
There were two practical things that I was reading the biography of Rabbi Gamliel. Two practical things that he stood firm on. One was contests for children to ask a really good kushya or to write really good divrei Torah, and that forced them. And actually, I remember this from Shlomo. Shlomo told me about his father, that when Shlomo was in college or when he was learning outside of the home for an extended period of time, his father forced him to, commanded him to write him a Dvar Torah on like a weekly or a monthly basis. And that made a big impression on me. So Rabbi Vadia had this expectation of younger children, and he also commanded his students to take time away from Kollel to go to go teach, to go pass on a shiur. And there were rabbis who wanted to put Rabbi Vadia in cherem for taking these avrechim out of the Kollel.
Look, not everybody who learns knows how to teach. That's a whole other story.
Anyway, so there are some practical things that could be done to increase the quality of the talmidim. But so what's the halakha l'maaseh, Rabbi? So we have diluted, mediocre talmidim, and so what is a Jew supposed to do?
I don't think I or anyone else could tell you less people should be learning, or we should be teaching our kids less. I would never say that. All I'm saying is, I think the reality is such that maybe we're better off with a higher average and less revolutionary individuals. I mean, that's just probably where we're going to end up. Mashiach is supposed to be someone exceptional, so I guess that's what we're waiting for. But I don't think Rav Vad Yosef, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, and the Chazon Ish, they're not going to be replaced. Rav Moshe finds we don't have anybody without authority today, and society's not going to accept them. No one's going to give the same degree of reverence to anyone today. It's just not going to happen. Not gonna happen.
So that it's like the flock is without what do you call a shepherd?
You have a lot of intermediate level people who just don't have that many.
And on a practical, everyday household basis, what does that mean for a household? You're saying
issues like brain death and abortion and life and death situations or complicated situations with yichus and giur. I mean, there's a lot of information out there. It's not like we don't know what to do in certain cases or we can't come to some kind of a consensus. I just don't think anybody's going to be authoring Tisha B'Av like that in the very near future. Look, that's me. It's my prediction.
So what's the distance between what you're saying and the Dati Dati guy who I spoke with on the way home who said, why should I ask a rabbi which school I should send my children to?
Yeah.
That's my decision.
No, Rav Sabato said the same thing. He doesn't want people coming to him with personal questions like who should I marry or what kind of car should I buy.
I remember the story you told me.
People who know more about
you're in the Rav said as well. I'm not going to accept the decision because it's yours to make and yours to live with, and you're not going to blame me for it. I understand that, but not to come here dat Torah, not to come here experience.
You say dat Torah. You have an obligation to run every decision that you make by a rabbi. Depends what the decision is. If it's something really bombastic and something important, maybe it's not a bad idea, but. What college to send your son to? Why would a Rav be any more qualified than anyone else? Medical advice, there's certain things insofar as it concerns halakha, yes. Once it's out of the bounds of halakha,
not as a binding, your Rav is giving
that's more of that's chassidut. That's where the Rebbe is the one who has the bracha, and he's the one who can give you advice that goes beyond logic and inexplicably key advice. I don't know.
I mean, sometimes you just want to ask a friend or someone who has a
friendly piece
more.
Of that sounds along the lines of.
So there's a second part of the
Mishnah. The first opinion where he says, so maybe he's talking about the same person. That a Rav is supposed to be someone that you have some kind of friendship connection with, or maybe he's talking about different people and he's telling you, having a Rav is one thing. That's your responsibility. It's one of the Pirushim I saw is that having a Rav is one thing that helps you satisfy your responsibilities between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Having a friend is an obligation, that you have an obligation, even if your Torah is perfect and you're very learned and you're spiritual, you still have an obligation to mingle with the rest of the world, meaning to have contacts, to have a social structure to your life, to interact with society. So just because you learn a lot and you like to hide in the Beit Midrash doesn't mean that you're fulfilling the obligations you have towards the society. You need to have a job. Give tzedakah, help people out, lend people money if they need it, and give it away if they can't afford to pay you back. Take care of the needs of people who can't fight for themselves. You have orphans, widows, girim, etc. So there's more than one way of looking at it. But what you used to have was Rabbanim that were just recognized by their peers as someone who is above and beyond. There's a famous question was asked to Rav Moshe Feinstein, but I don't want to run too late on Shlomo's time. Rav Moshe Feinstein was once called to testify. He was once called to testify in a New York court. So they brought him in as an expert witness of halacha because there was a partnership between two guys, and there was some halachic question that came up. I don't know what the case was. So he sits down in the jurors, the witness booth, and the judge seats him. He presents himself. He gives his name, his title, etc. And then right away, the prosecuting attorney starts asking him these very hard questions, saying to him, what makes you a rabbi? Who gives you this authority? What power do you have to be the one who makes the decisive decision on this particular topic? There's a lot of money at stake. I said, it's a good question. When I was learning in Russia, people used to come and ask me questions, and then more people came to ask me questions, and then rabbis came to ask me questions. Eventually, I understood that my job is to answer people's questions. It's like I didn't decide I'm a rabbi. He said the community decided that I'm a rabbi. People came to me with their questions. I got the idea that this is what I need to be doing. People asked me their questions. If I couldn't find an answer, I looked for it. Now I had answers to more questions. Developed that way. But the point that he was making was that it's not that someone randomly, arbitrarily makes himself a rabbi that forces his opinions on other people. People came to him for advice. This is the kind of person that you go to for advice, and eventually he became known as a person who gives precise halachic answers and good advice in general. That's it. There's there's a lot of siyata d'shmaya in this. Just help from above. When you're in a position where people need your help, Hashem gives you the help to give them. It's the Gemara says, in fact, when it comes to learning halacha and teaching it or giving halachic rulings, siyata min shemayahi. It's just you need help from above. How to give someone asks you a question, how to give them an answer that's appropriate to them, and about the same answer you would give to somebody else. You need help. You need to pray that the right words come at the right time, because sometimes you can go this way, you can go that way, you can be strict, you can be lenient, you can make a big mess if you're not attuned both to halacha and to the needs of the person in front of you. And sometimes you have to be lenient, sometimes you have to be strict, sometimes you find something you can rely on. We do what we can. At the end of the day, we're people. So just feel bad for Shlomo, it's his pride.